Well, it's going to vary from person to person. But generally speaking, I mean, first of all, almost all fruits are fine. There are some fruits that are probably not optimal, a few, but those are things like, which most people may not even realize are fruits, things like eggplants and olives. They're both very, very bitter in their natural state, and that should be telling us that we probably don't want to eat them. We start people here with their choice the first day of papaya, watermelon, or fresh out of the coconut water. I wouldn't use bottled coconut water, even if it's not pasteurized, because it's oxidizing as soon as it leaves the coconut. And in fact, I wouldn't use even coconuts, unless they're whole coconuts or have been kept refrigerated their entire journey. Unfortunately, most of the Thai coconuts that are shipped around the world are not kept cold enough to prevent them from going rancid. So when people work with me remotely, if they're not in a tropical or subtropical location where they can get fresh coconuts, I encourage them to eliminate coconut water as an option. But we'll start people with melons and papayas and coconut water because they're all very easy to digest, very high in water content, and pretty high in nutrients in most cases as well. And then as the process proceeds, we start to incorporate, introduce other things as well, at least options for people, including acid fruits like pineapples and oranges and tangerines, mangoes a little bit later because they're much lower in water content, and most people are needing to rehydrate the body quite a bit. Very sweet fruits like some of the ones I mentioned earlier, the mame sapotes, the durians and jackfruits, and even bananas are things I wouldn't recommend, and we don't include in the refeeding process unless someone's refeeding for 21 days after a long enough fast. They might start to get bananas. I wouldn't give them durian or jackfruit. It's just a little too rich at that stage of the process. But how much they eat, I mean, I can share with you what I do, and I think it's important to point out that having fasted many times and keeping a clean diet most of the time, my body's pretty efficient. And so I will eat, for instance, twice a day most days, some days once a day. I'll eat no more than about 1,200 calories most days. And I've got a tiny frame, but I'm about 150 pounds, and it's mostly muscle. And we use a bioimpedance device to measure body composition. And ours was a pretty sophisticated, reasonably expensive one when we got it. And it tells me that I should be eating just under 3,000 calories per day. And I don't eat a fraction of that. I mean, I do eat just a small fraction of that. That's based on the efficiency of my body. I mean, what I really tell people to do is to eat when they're hungry and to eat until they're satisfied. And for most people, that might mean eating 3 kilos of watermelon, which sounds like a lot when you look at the volume, or maybe eating, I think it was a year and a half ago, I was in Colorado where I've had some of the best peaches I've ever had in my life. I think I was there for a week, and I probably had peaches for one of my meals 5 times, 5 different days, because they were just incredible. And I would probably eat a dozen large peaches at one time. It's going to be a similar quantity of whatever the fruit is. Oranges, if they're pretty big oranges, it'll probably be at least 8 of them in order to just feel satisfied. If I'm eating apples, it's going to be, probably at least 8 of them, something like that. Maybe less if they're super, super big. I'll eat a couple of papayas this size. I'll eat 1 pineapple. That's usually enough for me. A couple of cantaloupes. Those are all sort of mangoes. If they're large ones, I might eat 3. If they're smaller ones, I might eat 6 or 8 of them.
Mm. And explain what mono meals are.
Sure. A mono meal is simply means that we're eating only one type of fruit at a time. I mean, for fruit meals, I recommend eating mono. I do eat green salads, and that, my green salads are typically going to be lettuce, tomato, cucumber, maybe some red pepper, not always, almost always some avocado, and maybe one other ingredient. Here we have a lot of fruits that aren't very sweet, like starfruit, which I love, delicious, interesting flavor, but it's not something I'd want to make a meal of. But sliced up in a salad, it's amazing. It's perfect. what some people call ground cherries, another sort of sunny, acidic fruit. I'll put that in the salad as well. One day it's a star fruit and one day it's a ground cherry, a bunch of them. But they're typically fairly simple, 4, 5, 6 ingredients max. But with fruits, it's usually one fruit at a time. And the reason to do that is because every single thing we eat requires a slightly different environment in the stomach for optimal digestion. So if we eat one thing at a time, we digest as well as possible. And this is one of the things that allows the body to be as efficient as possible. By efficiency, what I mean is we require the fewest number of calories to do whatever the amount of work is. That's obviously ideal because processing food takes more energy than anything else the body normally does. And so if we can reduce, one thing that's clear, there's lots of disagreement among people interested in longevity, like the experts, about what the optimal diet is or what supplements, if any, we should take. I say none, other people say you need some. But what everybody agrees on is that the fewer calories we eat, obviously you need to get the minimum to meet your body's needs, but that, generally speaking, caloric restriction, eating fewer calories means people live longer. Every species lives longer. With animals, with most species, if you restrict their caloric intake by 50%, they'll live 50% longer than the average member of their species. And there's no reason to believe we can't do exactly the same thing.